What we saw is that in the new world, collaboration in any form is increasingly important. And what we wanted to achieve is to provide a space where people naturally collaborate more, be it that they meet more often, be it that they meet in teams to work together. And that's what we try to provide in this work environment.
So people were quite reserved or isolated, sticking to their own designated space in the old building?
Yeah, in the old building, I mean, everybody had a desk, either in a small office or a somewhat bigger office, depending on the building. And that's where people went to every day. And if you wanted to meet someone, you had to get up and walk to wherever the other person hopefully was. And now it's much more natural. And we also, I think what's really important to understand, technology plays a huge role. So we have developed an app which let people find other people in the building. Basically type in the name.
You can't hide.
You can't hide. But it's not so much that we want to know where people are. It's the colleagues that want to know where people are. So I just type the name and the floor plan will pop up and it will indicate where the person is, in which corner of the building or wherever.
It's kind of like Pac-Man.
It's a bit like Pac-Man. Initially we thought people would be not so open to this kind of transparency, but people have caught on to that very much so. And this is now, I mean, the app has a lot of other features, but more than 60% of the time people use the app, it's to find other people in the building.
Now, when I look around me, I really do see a beautiful office. And given the location and the views and even the interior design, it's really quite something. So do you find that more people are actually coming to work than you expected, even though it is mobile working?
What we see, and that was a bit of a surprise in many ways, is that people that work from our other office in the Zurich area tend to come here much more often than what we thought. Sometimes they come here for a meeting and then they stay for the rest of the day. And sometimes, at least that's my suspicion, they only come here because they want to have a nice work environment, meet their colleagues, etc. Which is good, but it also led to the fact that we had to equip some of the workplaces differently to accommodate all the people that want to work.
Are there certain areas where people haven't really jumped on the bandwagon yet?
So initially I was surprised that our coffee zones were not used more.
I'm surprised too.
Yeah,
That's the area that everyone
today it was
jumps
very
to.
different and it has really changed. I think initially, and we've seen this in other offices as well, people were sort of a bit afraid. If I sit in the coffee zone and either work by myself or have a small meeting, maybe someone would think I'm not really working. And I think over time people have overcome this or are overcoming this. And now when you go to the coffee zones, there's actually a lot of people.
So you can relax and do work at the same time.
Absolutely. And you can have an excellent coffee.
Now, we talk a lot about increased productivity through these flexible working styles, but do you find that there are still certain elements where maybe a traditional office would still be more practical? For example, privacy or setting boundaries?
I don't see that. I mean, that's maybe an important point with respect to productivity. Obviously, we were able to lower the cost significantly because we don't have the relationship of one person, one desk. And on average, we measured that 50% of the time the desk was empty. Today, we have 1,100 people working off 800 workplaces. So that is a direct productivity saving. The other one is what we see through increased collaboration. That's obviously very difficult to measure. But if you just walk through the building, it's quite obvious that people talk to each other much more than they used to do so in the past.
And for someone like yourself, as an executive and those in higher managerial positions, can this be seen as maybe losing some of their privileges when everything is in the open?
We had an intensive discussion at the very beginning. I'm personally not in this building, just because the way we are organized at this, what we call the campus meeting. But some of my colleagues in the executive committee, and we had a discussion, would they want to retain an office or would they use the building exactly the same as everybody else? And they all said, no, we will be like everybody else. They organize themselves maybe slightly differently. They have a meeting room, which when they're here, that is at their disposal. But they are actually the most enthusiastic about it. They feel they're much closer. The barriers to approach them have broken down, and it works really well.
Let's talk about costs. How has this reshuffle of the space impacted on the costs? I see less desks, less working materials, maybe less energy consumption.
Yeah, so on the one hand, the workspace concept itself, which is global, has reduced the cost just because we have about 0.7 workplaces per employee. It varies a bit by office, by type of work. And then we have the building. And this building is very beautiful. It is also at a prime location in Zurich. So the demand to have good architecture was significant, and I think this is important. But overall, the costs are much lower because it's part of what we call campus meet and case. So we bring everybody together, which lowers the cost in many ways. This building reduces the energy costs per employee by 80%, 80. And it has other features which make this actually a very efficient office building. So it looks very nice, but it is very efficient.
Do you think people in Switzerland are ready to leave behind the traditional office? Or do you think we still need some sort of structure?
If I take our experience, I think people are ready to leave behind. What we see naturally is that elder people, so people that have worked in traditional office environment for a long time, for them it's more difficult. The transition is longer, and that's why we had this big change management effort. Young people, for them, it's natural. I mean, that for them, this is like what they're used to from university or from wherever. That's how they live.
So it's also a generational question.
It is a generational question.
Do you face that here, this issue?
We do face it. I think it would not be true if I would say it's not the case. But that's one of the reasons why we actually introduced this workspace concept. For the first time in history, we now have 5 generations that work in the same building. And it is incredibly important to make sure that even across generations, people communicate and collaborate. And I think this environment actually is very helpful to achieve that.
What's your strategy? Would you say you're more of an office or beanbag kind of guy?
Well, to be very honest, I'm not confronted with this question, and because I'm in the old building.
Yes, but if you had to choose today, would you still want a nice glass office in the corner or sprawled out in the middle of the communal area?
I'm glad that I don't have to make the choice, but I think if I really had to make the choice, I would go, after I've now seen this building, I would go for the modern building. It's just a different atmosphere, and the energy is much higher.
So, Mr. Wellauer, thank you very much.